where a variable can be accessed, how much is its lifetime, and how long that variable exists in memory. In this part, we're going to answer these questions. First concept that we're going to cover is scope. And scope is simply the part in your program where a variable is recognized and accessible. Think of this as your program is created by several rooms next to each other. And for example, 4 rooms creates one program. And for example, if you have some ball in one of your rooms, other rooms can't see and use that ball. And in this scenario, we tell that the ball is in scope of the room. And in our programs, our scope can be local, enclosing, global, and built-ins. But what are these and how we can use these items? Well, let's start first with our global scope, which global scope is where all of the other things and all things that we have can be accessed to variables in global scope. For example, let's say we got the simple x variable which holds number 5 inside of it. And in our programs, our rooms are simply our functions. For example, here we're going to have this function 1 and has something right here. Then let's say we're going to have 2 another functions with the names of f3 and f2. And as I told you, these are basically our rooms. And if we want to create a global variable, we can create that in our file. When we are outside of all of our functions and in our file, this means we are in our file scope. And this is as same as our global scope. Let's have example of how this item works. Well, here, let's say we got this x, which has this value of 5 inside of it. And in all of our functions, what we want to do is simply print this x into our output. But because we want to see which one is printing, here we're going to use fstring. We got this, then our x right here, and then this from function. Then here we're going to put the number of the function and close our string. And here we're going to have number 1 at the first. Here is our 2, and here is number 3. Now if we come outside of our functions and into our file and run all of our functions, so we got f1, f2, and f3. And if we run our program, you can see we got this result that 5 from function 1, 5 from function 2, and 5 from function 3. And actually we can move this output here into the side, so we can see this output right here as well as our code at the same time. And now let's get back into our code. Here you saw that x is a global and can be accessed anywhere. But let's say we want another variable right here with this y. And here we equal this with number 7. And let's say here in our printing, we want to print y instead of that x. And now if we run, you can see we got some errors right here. Which if we come down, you can see that we got this name error of y is not defined. But you can see that we got y right here. And that's why our 7 from function 1 worked. But none of others worked. So, as I told you, think this function as one room. Here we got this variable, so the things and lines of codes that are inside of this f1 function can access this variable of y and use them. But in f2 function, because this is in another room, it doesn't know that we got this variable of y right here. And as well as that, our function 3 can't use this item too. And just as same as we got this y right here, we can have another's here too. For example, let's say we got this a to be number 3. Here we want to print a, and in our function 3 we want to print a too. If we run this, you can see we got this 7 from function 1, 3 from function 2, because this a can be accessed this a. But again, we got this name error of a is not defined in our f3. But how we can access that y variable in all of our functions? You know that we can define it right here in our global scope, but let's say we don't want to do that and we want to create that in this f1. So the way that we can do this is by simply having this global keyword before of our variable. But you can see that here we got this error, and if we run like this, again it's not going to be run. And that's because here we first need to make this y global, then assign some value to that variable. For example, in this case, we created and made our y variable global, then we assigned number 7 to that. And now this time, if we run our code, you can see all of our functions can access this variable of y. Here you can see we got 7 from function 1, from function 2, and function 3. But what happened if we have some function inside of another function? Well, let's remove these functions from here and only got our f1 function. And let's make our y variable local in f1 and not global. And here let's say we got another function, and here we got this inner f1. And here inside of f1, we simply want to print this y. And now we're going to call our inner f1 inside of our f1 function. So here we're going to have this inner f1 right here. Pay attention. Here we created our inner f1 function in our f1 function. And here we're going to call it in our f1. So here it created and here we're calling it. And at the scope of our program, we're going to call our f1 function right here. Now, if we run our program, you can see we got the 7 from function 1 and this 7. Actually, we can have this kind of printing right here too. So let's fix this. And here, instead of function 1, we're going to say from inner function. Now, if we run again, you can see we got the 7 from function 1 and 7 from inner function. But what if we have another y inside of our f1 function right here? For example, let's say inside of this we want to have this string, which is this changed in inner function. And let's say we want to print our y again at our f1 function right here. So here we're going to have this y. Now, if we have this kind of program, if we check that, here we created our y variable with the value of 7. Here we're printing that and saying that it's from function 1. Then we have our second and inner f1 function here, and we got this y here again and has this value of changed in inner function. Then we're going to print this y again in our inner f1, which tells this y from inner function, and then we printing this y in our f1. And actually, let's print that at the last after calling our function. And now if we run this, you can see here we got the 7 from function 1 right here, which is this one that printed the 7 here and from function 1. Then we got from inner function. So here it's going to grab this y and print this. But if we check here, you can see when we printing this y, it's again the 7 and not this second value. And actually this y is going to see and use this one and not this one. But how we can have this y refer to this one instead of this? So we got this y, we want that one to be changed here and then use that here too. For example, let's say instead of this string, let's say we want this number 10. So for that, what we need to do is simply as same as we did with global. Here we got this non-local. And then we pass the name of our variable. Now this time, if we run our program, you can see we got the 7 from function 1, 10 from inner function, and then when we want to print this y, because here we not created another local variable in our inner f1 function and changed this variable's value here, it's going to grab the second value and the last value that's assigned to this variable. And basically here, nonlocal allows the inner function to change the variable from its enclosing scope. And what I mean from enclosing scope is the scope that this function has, which is this f1's scope. Now, we learned how these systems work, but how long our variable is available for us, how much time it takes to be inside of a memory, and we can use that. Well, for that, let's remove all of these items as well as this x at the top, and we only have this y as our variable right here. And here we're going to simply print this y in our f string, which here we put this y, and then from f1. You know, if we run this, we got the 7 from f1. But what is happened if we do the same thing right here in our global scope? But instead of this f1, we say from 5. If we run this, you can see again we got this name error, which tells us the name y is not defined. And basically here, the thing that does this is our lifetime. The lifetime of a variable is how long it stays in memory, which global variable like this x that we got earlier in our code lives as long as the program runs, but local variables like this one is created when the function starts and destroys when the function ends. So we can use this local from here that we defined it until where that we are inside of this f1 function. And after we moved outside of the f1, if we don't use the global keyword, it's going to destroy this variable automatically. But what are our whole scopes? Well, we know that we got our file scope that contains our local scopes, and again, this locals can contain other locals. But this file scope itself is going to be in this built-in scope. And basically this built-in scope is above of our file. Think of our program as some buildings. We got this built-in scope as our building. Then we got this file scope as our floor. And then we got this locals to be rooms inside of that floor. And if we got something right here in our building, it can be accessed from all of the things, the apartment itself, floor, and the rooms. If we got something in our floor, only the things inside of that floor and the rooms in that floor can be accessed. And if we have something in one of the rooms of the apartment, it's going to be accessed only from that room and rooms and places inside of that. But here Python has this built-in scope which includes things like print, len, or range, which you should never override these items and these names accidentally. And if we want an example of the thing that I'm saying, think of that we got this empty file right here and we got this simple variable of a to be this string of Python, for example. And of course, you know that we got this print and here we can have this len method. And here, if we pass this a right here, if we run our code, it's going to return us the length of our string. But let's say in some cases we accidentally override this len and assign this with another value, for example, let's say this number 5. In this case, if we run our code again, you can see we got this error and it says int object is not callable, which means when we created this len variable with the name of 5, when we want to use that built-in method of len, it's not going to see that and it's going to refer to this one that we got right here. And of course, it doesn't have any meaning to have this len equal 5 and parentheses and this variable of a. And as same as this, if we have, for example, this print here to be this 5, if we want to print our a here, if we run, you can see nothing is going to be happen again. So always be careful not to shadow Python's built-in functions. Now, for the recap, we learned about the LEGB rule, local, enclosing, global, and built-ins, and how global and non-local keywords help us manage variables. Learning these concepts will save you from confusing errors as your programs grow bigger. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next videos and next part of the crash course coming up. See you in the next one.